So today's video is going to be a quick one because it really relies on two videos that I've done before. The first video is making a dissolving shader, and the second one is how to create a single bitmap using seams and fills, color fills, to map onto a character. So both of these are required in order to do this last effect for how to destroy an enemy in a game. And this one, it's going to be kind of like a dissolving, kind of like on the old Star Trek when someone would be hit by a phaser and they kind of dissolve into nothingness because they get burned away. And we're using that dissolve shader. And it's important that your character bitmap be a single bitmap that maps to the whole entire mesh. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be dissolving that mesh with that dissolving shader in order to achieve our effect. I'll put links to those two videos if you want to see how I made the shader. Basically, this is the shader. We're using our bitmap, and if you watch the other video, this is a single bitmap that's going to map onto my entire robot character that we see in the scene. And that's going to be the texture that's dissolving. And it's going to use some noise patterns combined together in order to achieve our effect. So what we have here is, if we look at it, we have our robot body. And what I've done is I'm using my shader graph, my dissolve shader in a material. So this is my material, and what I did is I went to my shader graph. I selected my dissolve shader that I made as far as the shader that's used for that material. And then I have a couple inputs in my material. I have two colors that are going to mix together. And if we look quick at this, so essentially what it's doing is it's taking our two color inputs and it is combining them together here onto this noise pattern. So it's going to combine two colors for a noise, and it's going to be moving at a fairly rapid pace. And this is to give it kind of that shimmering look as we're dissolving away. And then we're going to have a dissolve width. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing part of our bitmap with this image and then slowly following it with a black image. And so it's going to be actually transparent. This black image is going to make it transparent because we're feeding it into the alpha channel here. Again, I go through this in detail in my dissolve shader video, so I'm not gonna go into the detail here, but just so we understand, our two colors are combining together here. We have the dissolve width, we have our main texture. This noise scale isn't really that important in this case, and then we have the dissolve amount, which is important. So if we go back to our scene, the two colors I picked were red. One is a really bright red. I gave it a pretty high intensity, so it's going to kind of glow more. And the other red I picked was fairly low intensity. So basically what you get is two colors of red, one brighter, that are going to be kind of moving around to give it that kind of shimmering red look. And then we have our dissolve amount. So if I just change this dissolve amount at 0, there is no dissolving. And as I do this slider, we can see, kind of if we zoom in, we see the edges, right? We get this. This is the dissolve width. So if we change that width, we can see it gets wider. So you can kind of say, you know, how thick should this edge be as it's dissolving away? And you can play around with that to get the look you want. And in this case, again, that one red is pretty intense, so it's giving a pretty intense glow. Because really, I mean, this is kind of fire burning away our characters, so you want it kind of bright. But you can choose any colors you want. And then once it reaches pretty close to 1, once it reaches 1, it's really going to be disappeared. So that's our shader. And then what we have is we've attached a script to this. So if we come down here, we can see I have this robot body as the material. Of course, I have a collider attached to that also. So I also have this dissolve robot script. And you'll notice I have one input called dissolve speed. So this says, how fast do I want to change that dissolve amount? And just let's go back quick to this part, because it's important to see that this reference, this dissolve amount, this string is how we access that variable in our shader from code. So that's important to know, that if you're writing your code, that you use the name, not the name, but the reference string of that variable in your shader in your code. So let's take a look at that script quick. So if you watched my previous 2 videos, this is really just adding on to that, using most of the script that I was using in those. And what we have is we have a script attached to the projectile. So essentially I have a projectile that I'm firing at my robot, and when it hits the robot, that's what this on collision enter. Again, I go over this in detail on my other 2 videos. But we have our collision enter, and I did that exploding barrel video. So if it hits the barrel, it does the exploding barrel, which I showed in my previous video. And in this case, if it hits a robot or a character with the name robot with full UV bitmap, which is what I called this robot that I brought into my Unity project. What it's going to do is it's going to get the component dissolve robot. Again, the dissolve robot is the name of the class right here, the name of the class that's going to do the dissolve. So I get that script component. Assuming if it's not null, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a function, a public function on that script called make dissolve, and then I'm going to destroy the object, which is the projectile which my script is attached to. So here's my dissolve robot. It doesn't do much. It has this serialized field, which I expose this dissolve speed. And what make dissolve does is it's just going to set this Boolean make dissolve to true. And in my update, I'm going to say if make dissolve is true, I am going to update a current time. Of course, the time defaults to 0 here. And my make dissolve defaults to false. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called current time, and I'm going to take the delta time, the change in time between my updates, and multiply it by my dissolve speed. So if the dissolve speed was, say, 1, it's going to dissolve, go from 0 to 1 in 1 second. If it's 0.1, it's going to go from 0 to 1 in 10 seconds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the render component and the shared material part of that render component, and I'm going to set my dissolve amount. Remember, this is that reference string that was attached to the property in my shader, and I'm going to set it to whatever current time is. Again, it's going to start at 0, and as the time goes on, it's going to go basically from 0 to 1 by this dissolve speed amount. And then just when I'm destroyed, I get that material again, and I set it back to 0 so that that variable is set back to 0 when I stop, so my character will appear again. And that really is pretty much it. Again, if you didn't watch my other videos, I essentially have we'll go back to Unity here. Zoom back out. Here's my scene. I have this component here that when I hit the space bar is just going to fire a projectile. And then that projectile is going to zoom. And when it hits the robot body, of course, we're going to get that collision enter. And it will run that script to dissolve our body. So really, that's pretty much it. It's just so we can see it. We'll zoom our camera out a bit. So we can kind of see that projectile when I hit the space bar. It's going to fire and our guy's going to dissolve. So that's pretty much it. Again, I'll put the links to those 2 videos on how to make that bitmap for your character and map it on using UV mapping, and then how to create that dissolve shader that we used in this video. So that's pretty much it for the destroy your enemy videos. We'll have to figure out what I want to do next. I might do some videos on some C++ coding, maybe some how to use object-oriented coding techniques in order to organize your game. Not really sure, but stay tuned for the next video, and thanks for watching.